Welcome to Notepad. I'm your host, Ibrahim Sani. There's plenty of talk about the extension of the movement control order. What we think will happen is that the extension of the MCO will happen tomorrow. The announcement will happen tomorrow, but we don't know how long the extension will be. So the conversation of whether or not people are okay with the extension of the MCO will take place very shortly. I have the research done by Ipsos talking about or making a study about people and their reaction on the extended MCO. But that will happen later. Right now, I would like to discuss a little bit more about the latest research paper that has been introduced by or that has been published by the Khazanah Research Institute, where they talk about the trade situation that happened during a pandemic. And joining me is the author of such a paper, Aidonna Jan, a longtime friend of mine actually. Hi Jan, how are you?
Hi Yim, thanks for having me.
So the paper, the KRI paper that talks about trade during a pandemic is something that has just recently been published. We want to know a little bit more about why KRI want to focus on this particular paper at this current moment.
So my husband is a frontliner, and shout out to all the frontliners. And so the reason why I did this study is to look at the medical supplies that we are importing and to see if there's any trade restrictions on these imports. There's also a study that was done by Professor Simon Evanet. He's based in Switzerland, and he painted an actually quite grim picture of the situation that we have. From a general level, in terms of all the countries, there is a situation where countries are imposing import taxes, or better known as tariffs, on the products that they will need to fight the pandemic, i.e. on these medical supplies. So I look at this situation in the case of Malaysia, Yem.
Right. What is it trying to address? What is the that you want to solve from this particular report?
So I'm looking at the extent of these trade constraints, i.e. trade in medical supplies. And basically what this means is it's getting additional cost and additional time with these trade constraints and trying to see whether or not anything can be eliminated, at least temporarily, to improve this flow of goods into the country.
So who would be best in terms of using this particular trade?
So my report has some policy recommendations. So therefore, policymakers is one of the people who I would like to read my report. But it's also businesses and organizations that are looking at sourcing the medical supplies or importing these medical supplies. There is a situation where countries are restricting the exports of their products, i.e. The exports cannot be exported, and therefore if that is the situation, Malaysia will have problems sourcing these imports or importing these imports. So we need to be aware of that and aware of the countries that are thinking of doing it.
Yeah, I want to focus on some of the highlights of the report. When you discussed, we touched a bit just now in terms of the medical supplies and many others. What would be some of the key findings and key highlights that you got from this report?
So in terms of the key highlights, in general, when I looked at 2018 data and the items that we might want to import into the country, the medical supplies that we might want to import, and it looks like around 9.5 billion ringgit worth of medical supplies that we imported in 2018. So in terms of the products that I looked at, it was 41 products covering about 34 product categories. So the list of products came from the World Customs Organization. So they came with a list of products such as diagnostic tests, protective garments, thermometers, disinfectants, medical devices, and medical consumables. I looked at the issue from three angles. First one is tariffs. When we talk about tariffs, we're basically talking about import taxes. There are two types of tariffs. One is MFN tariff rate, which is the tariffs that we apply on all importers. And then you have preferential tariff rates, which is the tariff rates that countries that importers get if their country has signed a trade agreement with Malaysia. So these would be countries such as ASEAN, Australia, China, Japan, and Korea. So when I look at the tariffs, MITI and Ministry of Health has actually done a relatively good job in terms of making sure we have zero tariffs on most of the products. However, I did find 5 product categories where we still do have MFN tariff rates, which is the tariff rates that we apply on all importers. So these products are face masks, protective garments such as face shields, plastic gloves and plastic garments, paper bed sheets, and alcohol solution, two categories of alcohol solution. On top of tariffs, Malaysia also has excise duties on alcohol solution. So in terms of looking at this perspective, yes, we do have tariff rates for these 5 products, but when we take out the countries that are able to import into Malaysia through the preferential trade agreements, the number is smaller. This is because Malaysia, on 3 of these products, Malaysia has imposed 0% tariffs for some of the countries that we have preferential trade agreements with, which means that the value of the products that we would bring in with these MFN tariff rates are approximately 286 million ringgit. So the temporary solution to this situation is actually temporarily waiving these tariffs and excise duties, which some countries have done. Countries such as Canada, EU, and India have come up with statements to say we are temporarily waiving these tariff and non-tariff measures while we are dealing with the pandemic situation. So the second area that I looked at is actually non-tariff measures. Non-tariff measures are a bit hard to have to talk about because they include health and safety measures, for example, and also things such as price control measures, quality control measures, and pre-shipment inspection. So they do have public policy objectives, but the thing is that these items also can have a restrictive or distortionary effect on trade. In the case of these products, the medical supplies that I looked at, we're looking at 23 product categories that have non-tariff measures. And if we can review them and look at to see which one we can at least temporarily remove during this period of us trying to fight the pandemic, that might be helpful in terms of helping the flow of imports into Malaysia. The third area is actually on export restrictions. So this is where countries have restricted the exports of their products, which means that we can't import it, or it's very hard for us to import it even if we wanted to. So in March 2020 alone, 33 out of 46 export curves were implemented by 54 governments. And so this is an indication of the speed in which countries are imposing this. Mind you, Malaysia also is one of these countries because we impose an export curb on face masks. But in the case of Malaysia, the rough estimate that I was able to come up with on the countries that have imposed these restrictions is about 132.5 million ringgit in terms of the value of the imports from these countries. Countries that we're looking at or that we seem to be impacted most would be from India, Indonesia, Switzerland, EU, and US. But as I've said, this dynamic it will change quite fast.
The problem here is that most of these countries are going through the same problems as we are in terms of the trade tariffs and many others. But from the healthcare front and from the social security front, they are rather worse off than us, or worse off than us, because of the inability for them to execute the order or lockdown on their parts. Deaths are higher, the people getting sick are higher. Do you think that they have what it takes in terms of trying to renegotiate it with new terms and new deals with us, considering that they themselves are undergoing through very tough and trying times right now?
Yeah, so I think that's where it gets tricky, because everyone is going through a scenario that they've never had to think about in recent history. The good thing is, for Malaysia, we do produce some of these items domestically. In the case of the worrying part for Malaysia, at least, would be the items that we do import, and we don't produce domestically. Even more worrying would be for countries, developing countries or least developed countries, who import everything, and therefore they are in a very scary situation right now, I would think.
What would be some of the key things that you find interesting from this report that you didn't think it was there before, but after doing this research, you realize that, oh, okay, this is something interesting?
It would be actually that the things that we import, it never occurred to me, but like 47% of our imports, at least in 2018, was on hydrogen peroxide. So that's an item used, or at least the product category that hydrogen peroxide comes under, and that's used as a medicament or an antiseptic for the skin. The countries that we import it from is Germany, US, Switzerland. We import more than 100 million USD worth of products from them.
Well, there's also intubation kits and many others, but I'm pretty sure these are the things that assume, needles and catheters and many others. But why do you think that we are importing so much hydrogen peroxide?
My best guess would be because we don't produce it domestically, but I don't know that for sure. Yeah, because like rubber gloves, everyone knows that Malaysia is a big producer, exporter of rubber gloves. So yeah.
Can you confirm with a definite answer, are we really exporting about 65% worth of rubber gloves into the US? Because that's what the US Embassy is touting right now.
I don't know. I would have to look. That would probably be something that I could check, but I would have to look at the numbers for you for that one. Yeah.
Okay, so let's move ahead right now in terms of reorienting who we need to trade more, who we need to trade less. Do you think that there is a time and place for us to now reconsider who we want to do business more, considering that these are the situations that we are all facing right now globally? Or is it okay for us to maintain this kind of trade partners mix that we have right now?
I think it's hard to say because of the fluctuations in terms of countries trying to deal with the situation. The good thing is that we import a lot of our products from China. So more than, in terms of the breadth of products that we import, China is one of the countries that we import more than 1 million USD or 4 million ringgit worth of products in more than about 20 product categories. So, and the other countries that where we have the breadth of imports at high value is the US, Singapore, Germany, and Japan. But to layer it even more, Yim, it's for some of the products we don't worldwide, we don't really have a choice in terms of who we're able to source it from, because some of these products, for example, protective garments and thermometers, only 3 countries export more than 10 million USD worth, which is about 40 million ringgit worth of these products worldwide, which means that we don't really have a choice when it comes to, for example, these 3 products. The good thing is, for these 3 products, it was identified by Simon Evenet that it's the value of these products are less than 1 billion USD. So yeah, we might not have a choice for some of the products. For some of them, because of the export restrictions, we may or may not even have a choice on those. But it's good to keep an eye out on this, and it's good that China is one of our bigger importers, because hopefully China has peaked in terms of their experience with the pandemic. Yeah.
Let's talk about some of the key, I guess, recommendations that you gave in the starting of the report. One of them is, of course, to monitor and engage with Malaysia's trading partners. And it seems like China is going to be a mainstay in terms of how and who we trade with. But closer to home, do you think that Singapore, being already our biggest trading partner, we need to rethink about how we can do business with them moving forward? Because they are kind of, I guess, grappling with this better than most in terms of COVID-19 recovery.
Yeah. The good thing about Singapore is that Singapore is like Malaysia, is also trade is very important to the country, which means that they will be very careful in terms of how they the trade policy angle versus in line with their public policy objectives. Another thing about Singapore is that they've actually come out to say that they will refrain from imposing export controls or tariffs as much as possible. So that's at least a good indication from our neighbors.
Final question, Jan. Let's take a look into the execution of the non-tariff measures and many other recommendations that you think might be useful for us in this time of need. Who do you think is going to be the stakeholders moving forward? What kind of ministries do we need to talk to? What kind of business partners do we need to build with? These are conversations that we need to move forward in terms of not just the research, but taking it to an actionable item.
Yeah, so the top ones that I can think of would be MITI and Ministry of Health, but these measures cover a lot of industries, and therefore the relevant ministries and agencies do have to talk to every industry that is impacted by the production of these goods when looking at the non-tariff measures, which is why that conversation is a harder conversation to have, because of all the stakeholders involved in making sure that there's a balance in terms of policy objectives in general.
Right. Thanks, Jan. Of course, Aidonna Jan Ayub is the Deputy Director of Research at KRI. When we come back, we'll discuss a little bit more about Ipsos's survey on the MCO. Don't go anywhere.